Hey, this is Raghavendra Kai here again, and we'll continue with our part three of the presentation. The last in part two, we found that how the Indo-European languages are have a very close similarity with European languages and North Indian languages, and how the South Indian languages, which are called the Dravidian family of languages, are completely different than the Indo-European family of languages. So one theory was proposed, which is called as an Aryan-Dravidian theory. So they thought that the original inhabitants of Indus civilization were Dravidians, and then Aryan came and they drove them back into the south of India. However, this theory has been debunked so many times, and with the no archaeological or literary or linguistic evidences, that still people claim this is it's so unfortunate. There is no memory of any migration from this Ilam region, what they call as the Iranian region, where they claim the similarity of the Dravidian languages with the languages spoken in this Ilam area. But actually, there is no such memory of migration from the Ilam to the Dravidian region. The Sangam literature, which is like composed between 1000 BC to like 100 AD, also do not mention any such conflict with the North India. There is no material or architectural continuity. So the Indus civilization was full of inscriptions, full of those special seals. You do not find anything of that nature in the South India, especially in the Tamil Nadu region. So all this claim of Dravidian being the original people of Indus civilization is not backed by any of the scientific evidences found, architectural evidences, geographical evidences, linguistic evidences, genetic evidences. There is no such um, evidence there. So the ASI has a genetic similarity. ASI basically means ancestral South Indians. They have a genetic similarity with the Onge or Andamanese people. So this migration took place far earlier than even the formation of the Indus civilization. So even before the formation of mature phase of Indus civilization. We'll talk about that in a later part. So one of the most important evidences is considered as a genetic evidences when it comes to the population movement. So, but the problem here is how we know the people originated in out of Africa, because we find a lot of genetic similarity with the African people, and the African genetics is the oldest um, uh, DNA available today. So that's why everyone says that the Homo sapiens, which is what the human race today in entire global population, is made of a single uh, Homo sapiens populations from Africa. So how do we know that? Due to genetics. But the problem with the genetics is it does give you some indication of how the population moved, but many times it does not give you the direction of the movement. And there are a lot of personal prejudices. So only because of the sample size, what we find as samples, the old samples, the genetic samples during in the burials are not like very large number of samples, so the numbers are very limited, and many times all these genetic studies have some personal prejudice also that plays into the part. That's why we have genetic studies uh, completely contrary to each other. But we'll take it as a sort of pinch, and we'll see into that as well. So one of the misconceptions that a lot of people have is with regards to the skin color. So many times you see people claiming that the North India has a fair skin and the South India has a dark skin. So that means those two people are two different people. But the skin color is not a genetic identity. You may have a same genetic identity, but your skin's color could be totally different. So even the skin color can change in the life of the lifetime of a person. Now, if you look at these actresses, Kajol or Shilpa Shetty or Priyanka Chopra, all those actors were like dusky, dark actresses, but over a period, their pigmentation got reduced and they became fair. So the pigmentation has to do with the direct sun rays that can change the skin of the color, and it depends on where you live, south or north of the equator. Now it's very clear the north of India, it lives on a of cancer line above. So you find these people more more fairer, whereas the south of India, the direct sun rays are come onto into that region because it falls below that line. So you will see more darker people, and that's not only in case of India. If you look at the Europe, the Italian people are not as fair as the Swedish people. So that difference still exists in Europe as well. So do we mean that the Swedish people are different genetics than Italian people? No. They are considered to be of the same race. So it depends on where you live. So the skin color is not your genetic identity. The most important part to understand is the genetics. So there are two haplogroups. One is called as the mtDNA. The mtDNA haplogroup is basically transfer from mother to the daughter, and the other one is the Y chromosome. And the Y chromosome starts off from father to the son. So there are three major mtDNA haplogroups. One is called as a MNR, and the other one, which is the Y chromosome, which is paternal chromosome, that is called as a C, D, and F haplogroup. So in India, you find all those haplogroups. The one of the foundational member of the entire genetic uh, identity of the females is the M haplogroup, and it says that it is originated in South Asia. That means Indian subcontinent. And there was a study done by this guy called Stephen Oppenheimer. It's a genetic study, and he concluded that India is the origin of the Eurasian mtDNA. So the mother side of the entire human population has been originated in South Asia, and that's why it's called as he calls it as the Eurasian Eve. And according to the Oppenheimer, it is highly probable that nearly all human maternal lineages in Central Asia, the Middle East, and the Europe descended from only four mtDNA lines that originated in South India sometime in 50,000 to 100,000 years ago. So the name Mother India is really opt when it comes to India. It is basically the mother of the entire world. Though the paternal lineages in India have different origins throughout the globe, but the maternal lineages is same, and this has been proven by various studies done, genetic studies done earlier, and these are the papers published in U.S. National Library and Medicine National Institutes of Health. The study is done by one study is done by the Sangamitra Sen Gupta, Lev Jablonski, Roy King, and all this. If you look at the crux of the study, they says that we found that the influence of Central Asia on a pre-existing gene pool was minor. The ages of the accumulated microsatellite variations in the majority of the Indian haplogroups exceed 10 to 15,000 years ago. So the whole genetic pool of Indians is formed well before Indus civilization started, so 15,000 years ago, which attests to the antiquity of the regional differences. Therefore, our data do not support models that invoke a pronounced recent genetic input from Central Asia to explain the observed genetic variation in South Asia. The R1A1, the R2 haplogroups indicate the demographic complexity that is inconsistent with a recent single history. And you can read this whole paper available on internet. It's called Polarity and Temporality of High Resolution Y Chromosome Distributions in India, identify both indigenous and exogenous expansion and reveal a minor genetic influence of Central Asian pastorates. The another study done called as the genetic affinities among the lower caste and the tribal groups of India, and this inference from Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA, which is the mtDNA. And this study is done by Ismail Thansim, Kumar Swami Thangarajan, Ganeshwar Chaube, and all this study. When they did this study, they concluded that the present study suggests that the vast majority, more than 98% of the Indian maternal gene pool consisting of Indo-European and the Dravidian speaker is generally more or less uniform. Invasions after the late Palestinian settlements might have been mostly male dominated. However, the YSNP data provides the compelling genetic evidence for a tribal origin of the lower caste populations in the subcontinent. So, the Y haplogroup could be different, but the mtDNA, which is the DNA transferred from mother to her offsprings, is more or less the same throughout caste in India. And this is the one of the studies that was done in Rakhigarhi, the in 2018, there was some old Rakhigarhi. They found one old skeleton in Rakhigarhi. The highlights of the studies are the individual was from population that is the largest source of ancestry of South Asians. There is an Iranian-related ancestry in South Asia, split in Iranian plateau lineages 12,000 years ago. So earlier it was thought that the Indian Indus civilization was seeded by the pastoralists and nomads from Iran, but with the Rakhigarhi sample, it was conclusively proven that uh, the Indus civilization started indigenously, independently, and the lineages between the Iran and the Indus civilization split some 12,000 years ago, before the start of even the agriculture, and before uh, the start of Indus civilization. And the first farmers of the Fertile Crescent contributed little to no ancestry to later South Asians. So, original theory that the Fertile Crescent, as we talked, the Iraq, Iran, Palestine, this area, the people from this area had a very little contribution to the later day Indus civilization. That was what this Rakhigarhi uh, results proved. Just to explain this theory in detail, there were three skeletons which were taken from Gonur. Gonur is basically, as you can see here, it's in the Africa, in the Afghanistan here. And then there is 11 skeletons from Share Sokta. The Share Sokta is from Iran. So there were 11 skeletons taken. This is called as the Indus periphery because the Indus civilization was matured in this phase. So it is kind of assumed that the people living on this periphery, which is called as the Indus periphery, would have genetic similarity with the Indus population. So there was one Rafiguri sample. It was very difficult to get the DNA intact when it comes to the northern part of the India because it's so hot there that the DNA does not survive longer. So we're talking about like 5,000, 6,000 years old DNA. So we are so lucky to find this one DNA in Rafiguri, which is basically current day Haryana. And they found that DNA. They could use that DNA and it was intact DNA. So we were lucky to have that DNA from one lady, basically, which who lived 6,000 years ago in Haryana at that time. And they analyzed the results, and the results showed that if you look at here, the lineages between the Iran Indus Valley Cline and the Southeast Asian hunter-gatherers and Southeast Asian farmers separated long before, like around 12,000 during the period of Holocene. They separated there, and the next lineages is separated at around 11,000 years ago, well before 10,000 BC, and the one branch formed the Iranian hunter-gatherers and Iranian herders, and then they formed the Western Iranian farmers, the Anatolian farmers from that particular branch. But the Indus, which is the Southeast Asian hunter-gatherers and Southeast Asian farmers, have no genetic affinity towards the Indus Valley cline, which is basically the Iran Afghanistan cline. And that concluded that there was no genetic mixture after 12,000 BC from Iran or Middle East into the Indus civilization. Like I stated earlier, this whole presentation is triggered by this book called The Horse, Wheel, and Language: How Bronze Age Riders from the European Steppe Age Shaped the Modern World by David Anthony. And this book won the archaeological American Archaeological Award for the best book in 2010. Basically, what Anthony is trying to propose here is that the spread of the Indo-European languages is facilitated by the domestication of the horses, and the first domestication of the horses started in 2500 BC in the steppe region. The steppe region is basically the vast the grassland in the European, and basically the Russian side. So on this side, the first domestication of the horses started, and that then they designed the chariot wheels, and not only the chariot wheel, the spoked wheels. The spoked wheel was an extremely important innovation for the faster mobility. Once you have the spokes wheel, which is basically the lower weight wheel, then you can move faster, and then you have an supporting animal who can run faster than the cows or the oxes or any other animals. So that gave this herder community an edge over the entire global population. So they started moving towards the east into the Europe and towards the west to their to sorry to the west into the Europe and towards the east into the Middle East, and then slowly into the India. That's what the theory is. Next, if you look at the steppe region here, so it basically starts from this Ukraine region all the way up to the Mongolia region. So this vast Greenland, this is where the Indo-Europeans lived, the first Indo-Europeans lived, and then they started moving here. So the question is, how were the European people by then? Because the Europe was occupied well from 30,000 to 40,000 BC. So basically, the European peoples are called as the Finno-Ugric people. So they were like a little different people. They had their settled lifestyle, but then the Indo-European people from the Yamnaya culture, and we talked about the Yamnaya culture, which is basically the Western steppe culture from current-day Kazakhstan. They moved into the Europe and conquered the local European population, and then established themselves into Europe. And similarly, some small group moved into the eastern side, and and they spread the languages, the Indo-European languages, towards South Asia. And the theory is like this. So what they claim is the Yamnaya culture later moved into this bigger Adronova culture, and then slowly the people from this BMAC is basically Bactria Margariana culture, and this is what the figurines that are found in that culture. But the interesting part here is the people from the Bactria Magrana culture genetically have little to no contribution to the later South Asian cultures, which is basically the SWAT culture, symmetry age culture. Symmetry age culture is basically the people started cremating people rather than burying people, and the cremation, after cremation, they used to keep the remnants of the ash, basically the burnt ash, into this kind of pots here. So this is called as a cemetery edge culture, and then the cemetery edge culture later went into copperwood culture, and then into the painted graveware culture, which is found in Mahabharata region towards the east part into Punjab and Haryana. But the major hurdle to solve here is the Kurgan hypothesis proposed that the people from this BMAC, the Bactria Magrana culture, moved further south, some into Iran and some into the northwestern part of India. But then if you look at the genetic history, there is absolutely no connection between this BMAC culture people and into northwestern India people. Rather, the northwestern Indian people have found some transfer of their genes into the BMAC culture. So that is basically the contrary evidence against the spread of the Indo-European languages from the steppe region into the Indian region. And we'll discuss that later again when we talk about the out of India thing. Now, just to give you the entire Kurgan hypothesis and the revised Kurgan hypothesis as proposed by David Anthony and people. And I don't want to go into the European side of language spread. We'll talk about the South Asian spread of the language spread. So what happened was, and what is proposed is that the people from this corderware culture, basically Yamna culture, spread into the corderware culture. Corderware culture then moved into this something called as the Sintastha culture, and the Sintastha is basically they have these forted cities like this circular kind of cities, and that Sintastha culture we first find the cremation of the bodies, the dead bodies, And then the theory is some people moved into the Iran. Basically, the Iran, the word comes from Aryan, so it has very close similarity with the word Aryan. So the Iranians are basically the word comes from that Aryan region, and then some moved into these Indo-European languages at around 1500 BC. That's basically the theory there. So we talked about different migrations throughout the history. So let's try to summarize this whole migration um, throughout the history. So first migration took place from out of Africa at around 70,000 BC. These people came from Africa into India through Gujarat and then migrated towards the south of India and then moved out of India. So this is basically this population here is called as the RC population, the ancient ancestral South Indian population. So one is the RC, which is basically 70,000 BC to 50,000 BC migration. The next migration started at around 40,000 BC to 12,000 BC. The people from the Middle East, from European, from Iran, they started moving into the Indian subcontinent, into current day Punjab, Haryana, and Pakistan. These are the people of combination of ancestral North Indian and the Iranian hunter-gatherers. This is basically from 12 up to 12,000 BC. From 7,000 BC to 2000 BC, this whole Indus this whole Indus population formed, which is basically the combination RC, ancient ancestral South Indians, ANI people, the ancestral North Indian population, and some hunter gatherers which were originally living there. So all these people combined together form the population of the Indus Valley. Parallelly, before this matured phase of the Indus Valley civilization, some hunter gatherers from that Indus Valley civilization started moving towards south, and they mixed here with the Asi people who were staying. The Asi, the ancestral ancient South Indian peoples, were basically current day Andamanis or Onjay people. So the some people from the Indus Valley civilization between 5000 BC to 3000 BC mixed with the original people from South India, which are the RC people, and they form the what is we call as the ASI, the ancestral South Indian gene pool in the south of India. That's why we see such a little bit difference between the North Indians and South Indians. But we'll talk about that in a moment. And then around 3000 BC to 2000 BC, some elite migration took place, basically with regards to the traders from the steppe region. We saw the steppe region, basically the south of Russia, where the horses were domesticated, first chariots were invented, and these people moved into the Indus Valley at around 3000 to 2000 BC, possibly even later 2000 BC up to 1500 BC, and that gave a way to uh, composition of the Vedas and the spread of the Indo-European languages into the Indian subcontinent. And this is very important slide because it basically combines all the migrations into India. There are some migrations happened out of mainland India from Tibeto-Burman region, Burmese region, which is called as the ancestral Tibeto-Burmese population, which lives in the Himalayas all the way up to northeast of India. And then there is some population which moved from the far east side of India, and they settled into the Asio-Asiatic, which is called as the Asio-Asiatic, from Vietnam, from Philippines, from the eastern side of the Indian subcontinent. Some people settled on the eastern border of the India, which are called as the Asio-Asiatic people. So India is a melting point of all races: Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Negroid, all these races and all the language families: Indo-European, Dravidian, Asio-Asiatic, the Tibeto-Burman language. So it's basically the melting pot of cultures, languages, and people. So how did the caste system form in India? And this is a very controversial subject because if we look at the genetic mixture within India, it is more or less the same. From around 3000 BC to 100 AD, there is a lot of mixing took place between the ancestral North Indian people and ancestral South Indian people, all the way up to 100 AD. And at around 100 AD, it looks like something called as endogamy started. Endogamy is basically not marrying out of community. And what started that actually is no one knows. So this whole notion of some people moving from out of India, settling into northwestern, and they started the caste system, and with the start of the Vedas, the caste system started, is not true. As you can see, we have a clear genetic evidence of mixing of different peoples from 3000 BC all the way up to 180. So it looks like there was no caste system by then. And it started at around 180 with the start of endogamy, where people stopped mixing into one another community, and this rigid caste system unfortunately developed within India, and the society got discriminated on the basis of work. So the people with the priestly work were called Brahmins. Then the people who go to war are called Kshatriyas, and the trader people are called Vaishyas, and the people with physical work that do called as Shudras, and then another community is found as Dalits. And this became such a rigid system that growing out of the system became extremely difficult. Even if you look at the ancient Indian and Puranas and all, it looks like the migration from one community to the other community was very much possible up to 180. If you look at the Mahabharata, Mahabharata was written by Vyasa. Vyasa is not a Brahmin; he is from the Kshatriya clan. If you look at the Ramayana, Ramayana was written by Valmiki, who is again not a Brahmin clan. He was from the Shudras or from Dalits community. So it looked like up to 180, it was very much possible to move from one class into the other class. So this was not a caste system by then, it was kind of a class system, and it was very much possible to move from one class into the another class. But by 180, something changed, and there are a lot of theories what happened and how it happened. But unfortunately, it happened, and with the invent of endogamy, where the marriage took place between the same communities, the Indian population started going into groups, and the caste system originated. And that's why you see this whole variety of people all throughout India. So there are like Negroid people, there are like people with the blonde, blue eyes, blonde hair, or very fair people. There are black people. There are Adivasis, which are basically the Asi people, and then you have the Mongolid race in the northeastern part of India. So it basically formed this whole unique spectrum of 50 shades of colors. It's like the most interesting, amazing diversity that was found within India. And nowhere in the world, across the world, you can find such a huge diversity in the facial phenotypes, in the colors, in the genetics, in the languages. And yeah, it became an interesting, extremely interesting phenomenon in India, where you see these different people living in one geographical space, which basically is a formation of around 70,000 years of history. Amazing. The next, if you look at the geographic distribution of India in terms of the Y haplogroup, which is the paternal lineage, Y haplogroup is basically H haplogroup and R1A haplogroup, and this is an important slide here. So H haplogroup is considered to be originally from India, and then there is an R1A population with haplogroup, which is found mostly in the European population. So H haplogroup is not found into European population, and R1A population is found into European population. Just note that H is basically indigenous Indian, and there is no doubt about it. R1A is basically um, found throughout the Middle East, throughout the Europe, and it's very dominant in European population. So if we look at the Indian population into Central, East, West, North, and South, you will see that there is a consistent um, H haplogroup and R1A haplogroup. So it looks like these two populations, this is the current day population. These two populations have derived from same genetic structure. The variation is there. So if you look at the central India and the western India, and northern India, you will find more R1A and less H haplogroup. whereas in South India and East India and you will find the less amount of R1A haplogroup, but it is there. The combination is there, though the variation does exist, but they are all the genetic combinations are there. If you look at based on the classes, the caste, in the lower caste, middle class, upper caste, the chamars, which are considered to be the lower class, the Brahmins, West Bengal Brahmins. Interestingly, the West Bengal Brahmins have the highest level of R1A haplogroup, which is which is very interesting because you would expect the R1A population to be more concentrated into the northwestern part of India or Kashmir part of India, but that's not true. The R1A, which is supposedly the haplogroup related to the European population, is found mostly into the West Bengal Brahmins, and then and the interesting, people think that the J&K, the Jammu and Kashmir people, are most fair people and they resemble more like an European people, but the R1A diversity or the frequency in this group of people is extremely low. It's even lower than it's very close to the lower caste people. And then across Brahmins across India, again, the notion that the upper caste Brahmins should have the more affinity towards the European haplogroup R1A1, but that's not again true here. It's only 28% Brahmins carry the European genetic ancestry. So, as you can see, across the caste, the both H haplogroup and R1 haplogroup do exist. Looking at the country-wise distribution of the haplogroups, if you look at the Afghanistan has got zero H haplogroup. That means the Indian H haplogroup, which is the indigenous Indian haplogroup, doesn't exist in Afghanistan. They have very high percentage of R1A, the 50% R1A haplogroup. In Pakistan also, they got 6.2% H haplogroup and 24.4% Y haplogroup. Indian Dravidians and the India total, if you look at that combination here, has got extremely similar combinations. So R1A1 26.7% in the Indian Dravidians, and the total Indian population has got around 27.3% of R1A1. Again, genetically, it's very proven that the Dravidian people are no different from the rest of India people. There is an extremely close affinity in H haplogroup and Y haplogroup between these two groups. Even in Sri Lanka, you will see there is a 27% Y haplogroup R1A1. The Sinhalese language itself is an Indo-European language. It's not the Dravidian language. So if you look to the south of India, the Sri Lankan language is closer to Sanskrit and European languages than to the Dravidian languages. So it's a very interesting study when it comes to genetics. So if R1A1 frequency is so widely found in India, so the origin of R1A1 group is debated. Now, some people have put the origin of R1A1 into Europe, and some people have put the origin of the RNA1 into the Punjab. Basically, this R1A1 depends on how much is the diversity of this haplogroup and how much is the frequency of the haplogroup. The highest frequency of haplogroup is, like you can see here in the blue region here. So it's found in Bengal, in Punjab, and in Gujarat. Some people have put the origin into the this part into the Iraq, Iran part, whereas some people have put the into Punjab part. So it looks like the migration took place in ancient times between the Middle East and between the northwestern India into Punjab, and this people mixed, and that's why you see such a high frequency and diversity of R1A1 into the Indian population. So one theory is proposed that the possible migration route could have been from India into the outwards of the India, because the oldest R1A1 population, which is basically 15,000 BC, is found in India, not in Europe. So given by the diversity and given by the frequency of R1A1, it looks like the the R1A1 haplogroup originated into India sometime around 15,000 BC. And we talked about the genetic evidence indicates that most of the ethno-linguistic groups in India descend from a mixture of two divergent ancestral populations, ancestral South Indians and ancestral North Indians, and they mix together from 4000, 5000 BC up to 100, AD, and sometime in 100 AD they stopped mixing into each other with the advent of the endogamy. And from then towards now, we have this different people: Andamanese people, Asiatic people, Dravidian people, Indo-European people, Tibeto-Japanese people, combination of everyone here in mainland India. Again, going by the entire Y chromosome spectrum, there are uh, basically four Y haplogroups are found in India: H, J2, L, R1A1, and R2. If you look at the frequency of these four haplogroups, Y chromosome haplogroups. Y chromosome, just a reminder, is paternal haplogroup. So if you look at that, and we conclusively prove that the mtDNA, which is basically the DNA transfer from mother to its offsprings, is 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 constant throughout India. 98% of the Indian carries the same haplogroup. So it looks like the maternal ancestry of Indians is same. The paternal haplogroup have a variation here. If you look at the North India has got a very high percentage of R1A1. The west of India has got an even higher percentage of R1A. The South India has got a little bit lower percentage of R1A, and the East India has got the highest ever percentage of the R1A. Similarly, the H haplogroup and L haplogroup has a variation in percentages between North, South, and East India, which basically means that there is some migration took place into India subcontinent, but um, at some point all these people mix together, and that's why they carry the genetic evidences or the genetic footprint um, of their ancestral paternal lineages, and which are same all across India. And there are a lot of studies done, and I refer to the studies, like I said, from the papers published in Science Cell magazines, and these are also published in the U.S. National Library of Medicine. And this is one study done by the Prehistory of Indian Y Chromosomes by Sangamitra Sahu, Jilam Banerjee, and Amika Singh. And this is very famous study, and they concluded that it is not necessary, based on the current evidence, to look beyond South Asia for the origins of the paternal heritage of majority of India at the time of onset of settled agriculture. The perennial concept of people, language, and agriculture arriving to India together through the northwest corridors doesn't hold up to close scrutiny. Recent claims for a linkage of haplogroups J2, L, R1A, and R2 with the contemporaneous origin of the majority of the Indian caste paternal lineages from the outside of the subcontinents are rejected. So that means not only the maternal lineages, but also the paternal lineages more or less have formed indigenously within India. And although our findings do support a local origin of haplogroup F and H, the J2 indicates an ambiguous recent external contribution. So the J2 seems to be originated in India from Middle East, and West Asia to Central Asia is what has been proposed or hypothesized based on the current genetic studies. There is another theory based on the studies that R1A1 frequency and diversity is found in India more than in rest of the Europe, and the rest of the Europe carry the R1A1, but the age of this R1A1 genes is around 15,000 BC, and it's older in India than in Europe. So one theory is proposed called as an out of India theory. So there is this Vedic kingdoms in India which are which is proposed by the current day scholars who propose this out of India theory, that there were these Purus, Druids, people. There were basically five kingdoms in India: Druids, Purus, Anus, and the Vedic people. When they talk about the first name, they refer to themselves as Purus, and they refer to the other people as Anus and Druids. And the one theory proposed that these Druze people from this area, which is basically the Iran, They moved out of Iran into the Turkish, formed the Hittite language from the Iranian plateau, and they moved through these Anus people moved through Iran into the Europe via this route, and then the Druze people moved into the steppe region and formed the European population. Though this theory has been currently proposed, it has not found a global audience and global acceptance into academics. It's considered as a fringe theory today, and I think the more investigation and more genetic research is needed. Um, and if you look at the invasion into India, since the Persian invasion into India from the time of Bimbisara to the invasion of Abd Ali, the flow of the invasion has been strictly one way. Everyone has moved into India through a Bolan or Khyber Pass, the subcontinent. The Persian invasion, Greeks, Sakas, Parthians, Kushanas, Hunas, Arabs, Turko-Afghans, Mongols, Mughals, Persians, Afghans, everyone has moved into India, and there is no evidence supports that there is no solid reason for migration from India into outwards because the Indian um, land was so fertile that people were attracted towards India rather than there is no reason to support any migration out of India. So that's why this theory is not widely accepted. If you look at the geography of Vedas, and this is the linguistic evidence, the explicit geography of the Veda is limited to an area from the eastern areas of Afghanistan to the west, and the western area of the Ganga and Yamuna in the east. So it covers in modern terms current day Afghanistan, the northern half of the Pakistan, Punjab, Indian Punjab, Haryana, and the adjoining parts of Uttar Pradesh. So in Rig Veda, there is absolutely no mention of any part or any area other than this particular region. There is no mention of any flora, fauna, animals, places, people out of this area. There's no memory of homeland out of India in Rigvedic people. So it looks like the Rigvedic people were originally inhabitants of the Indus civilization, which then adopted the Indo-Aryan languages. Some movement did take place to carry this language with them in the patron-client kind of a relationship, which David Anthony refers to as the elite recruitment, and these people adopted the languages. The Rig Veda were being probably being composed in the Indus languages earlier, but then they translated into the Vedic languages because Rig Veda has absolutely no memory of anything outside of Indian subcontinent. And one of the major evidence against the external origins of the Rigvedic people is the Nadi Sukta, the mention of the river Saraswati. So if you look at the Nadi Sukta, it says Gange, Yamune, Saraswati, Shutadri, Sachit Sachata, Purushanya. And if you look at the rivers from the east to west, they have Ganga first, they have Yamuna, and then they have this Ghagra Hakra river. And there is a lot of debate about this, whether it's Rigvedic Saraswati or any other Saraswati. But there is looking at this whole verse mentioned in Rig Veda, it looks like this is the Saraswati that they are referring to, and they have referred to Saraswati as the most mightiest river, and they have also mentioned Saraswati getting dried up in Rig Veda. Now we know with the current day evidence that the Saraswati basin was dried up in 2000 BC, and it started drying up from 3000 BC, and it was flowing to its fullest back in 3000 BC or before that. And we have a lot of settlements found on the banks of this Saraswati River, which means that the Rigvedic people had pre-knowledge of Saraswati, or the people who composed Rig Veda had some kind of a knowledge of Saraswati, which was flowing in 3000 BC. So if you want to put the composition of Rig Veda in 1500 BC, then you have to explain how did the Saraswati appeared in the Rig Veda. Another important term to understand here is if you look at the European names of the rivers, the Danube, the Volga, the Loire, the Rhine, the Elbe, all these river names are the original European names. They are not the Indo-Europeans names. So the Indo-European people, when moved from the steppe Russia into the Europe, they did not change this river names. And throughout in America, if you look at the Mississippi River, lots of other rivers in even in America, you will see that the names are not changed. Uh, the names such as Oklahoma, Massachusetts, Ohio, Iowa, the Missouri, all these names are the original Indian Red Indian names. These are not the European names. So name of the places, name of the rivers, name of the mountains, all these names, they at least some names survive, and they are not changed even after the invasion had took place. So even after the European people moved into America, you see that the names such as Oklahoma, Ohio, Mississippi have not changed. Similarly, in Europe, the name of the rivers have not changed since time immemorial. Even if the migration and invasion took place in those regions, if you look at the river names, Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati, Shatudri, all these names are the Indo-Aryan names, and they have not changed. So it means that there were no other people living in that area, other than the Indo-European people, which basically then composed Rigveda on their own. And that's one of the theory which is called as the out of India theory, proposed by some scholars such as Srikant Tallegiri, Michael Danino, Ilstadot. There is this another scholar, Chaube. They all talk about this out of India theory. Another evidence that these out of India proponents present is the presence of five Vedic kingdoms. So, as per Puranas or as per Vedas, there were five kingdoms residing in India at the time: the Dhruyu, Anu, Puru, Yadu, and Turvasa. So the Purus, when the Rigvedic people talk to them as Purus, when they are referring to themselves as Puru. And the Purus, as we know clearly through historical evidences, were settled around the Himachal Pradesh, Haryana region, and they were they call themselves, the Vedic people call themselves as Puru people. So it looks like the Druyus and Anus, they say that the Anu kingdom, basically the Iranian kingdom, they got into through Europe into the Middle East, and the Druyus got through that region from Afghanistan into the Europe, and that's basically the out of India theory. And they say that the Indo-European languages spread through these kingdoms into rest of the world. But like I said, there is no mention of horses or chariots in the Indus civilization. So this one has extremely um, low probability of Indo-European languages spreading through these kingdoms. It's very likely that the Indo-European languages came into India from outside, from the steppe region, but the migration of the people did not take place. The language can be transferred via idea transfer. Like if you look at the Sri Lanka today, they take Sinhalese language. The Sinhalese language is the Indo-European languages. So they did not have any genetic affinity with Europeans. So it clearly means that the languages can be transferred without the major migration of the people. Another evidence proposed by the out of India proponents is the some astronomical events as mentioned in the Rig Veda. So the or later Sanskrit text. So the Rig Veda talks about some summer solstice and equinoxes, and one of the verse talks about the summer solstice happening in Uttar Falguni Nakshatra. And if you look at if you reverse the clock today, we see that the spring equinox, the summer solstice occurred in Uttar Falguni Nakshatra by around 3000 BC. Similarly, there are some other verses which talk about some of the Vernal equinoxes are happening in the middle of the Ashlesha Nakshatra, which gives you date about 1300 BC, and Atharvaveda also talks about the vernal equinox happening in Kritikas, which gives you the date at around 2400 BC. 2400 BC. So that means, given the astronomical evidences or astronomical events mentioned in the Rig Veda and later Vedic texts, it looks like the composition of the Rig Veda has been taken place from 3000 BC to around 1500 BC. It could be possible that those um, languages, when the Rig Veda was originally written, were written in the Indus languages, which we do not know what that language was, but then later transferred by some people in the Indo-European language through the migration of some Indo-European people, some people from the steppes into mainland India, and then later on, it could be possible that some languages, and how we connect the dots, because at one point you have the references of certain events, of certain the river Saraswati, which cannot be there if it's not written by 3000 BC, and then you have this another evidence which shows that there cannot be an Indo-European languages into the Indus civilization. So to mix it together, I think, and this has been proposed by some people as well, that the Vedas were existent not in Indo-European languages, in some other language, and then they get translated into the Sanskrit language later on with the similar references as were written originally. Another interesting part, and we should have covered that in earlier slides, but just to talk about, there is this Mitanni kingdom which was present in 1600 BC in modern Iraq, and this was a very big kingdom, lasted for around 200 years. And they mentioned these gods called Indra, Varuna, and Ashwin, and these gods were very similar to the Rigvedic gods. And this is like 1600 BC, and this kingdom was into present day near the Mesopotamia region. And if you look at the names of the kings of this kingdom, they have this name called Kirta, Shaturatna, Prashattama, Parashara, Sashuratra, Turushattara. Now, all these names are very similar. Artharatma, Chaturatna, all these names are very similar to the Rigvedic names, but the language is spoken by these people is the Samhurian language, which was not the Indo-European languages. So it's a very interesting evidence, and this evidence is taken by both proponents, the Aryan migration proponents, as some people from the Sintasta culture moved into the Europe and then later into the Middle East, and though they retained their names into the Rigvedic language or some ritualistic part of Rigvedic Sanskrit language into the Middle East, but then they forgot the language. And some people moved into India and formed the Rigvedic language. And similarly, the out of India proponent take this evidence as the proof of people migrating from that Anu kingdom, people migrating from that region of Iran into the Iraq and then through towards the Turkey through this Mitanni kingdom. Very interesting kingdom, and both the out of India proponents and the Aryan migration proponents use this as an evidence for their own claims. If you look at some of the rituals in the Zoroastrian culture, which is practiced in the Persian region, in Iran, a lot of those cultures carry a very similar practices as in the Rigvedic period. And even the names, the word gold is called Hiranya in Sanskrit, whereas it's called Zaranya in Avestan. Army is called Sena in Sanskrit, Haina in Avestan. A lot of yajna, the sacrifice ritual is called yajna in Sanskrit, whereas it's called yasna in Persian languages. The priest is called as a hotar in Sanskrit language, whereas it's called zautar in Western language. So all these similarities cannot be just the coincidences. So it looks like the Vedic rituals were originated at some place near Iran in Afghanistan, and then later they spread into India. But the Vedic rituals are not the only component of the Hindu religion, and that we will take on later on. So just to conclude on my and these different theories that we talked about. So some of the facts supporting the Aryan migration are no traces of horses and chariots in the Indus before 2000 BC, no traces of Sanskrit language before 2000 BC, genetic similarity of the ANI, especially the steppe ancestry, which is found in the North Indians, and some aspects of Vedic culture missing in Indian civilization, such as the fire worship, Indra worship. The Indus civilization found to be more of a fertility goddess worship or nature worshipper people and not these Indra worshipper peoples. Facts supporting no widespread migration. So the mention of Saraswati River in the Vedas is a question mark. How did it come here? If it dried up in 3000 BC, this is the only river which is deified in Vedic culture. So no other region, Ganga, Yamuna are not deified. They were deified later in the Puranas, but if you look at the Rig Veda, the only river that has been deified is Saraswati, and there are so many hymns mentioning Saraswati that it's highly unlikely that these people were coming to India at a later date after the dying of the Saraswati. Names of the rivers, animals, oceans, all have the Indo-European languages. There is no traces of any other language than the Indo-European languages. There is a genetic similarity of the Europeans, and that does not indicate any direction of the migration. No mention of any geographical region, places, rivers, outside of Indian subcontinent. The material, cultural, religious continuity throughout mainland India from the Indus into the Vedic civilization. So if you look at the names of the gods, like Krishna is considered a black. So the Rama, the word itself is black. There are a lot of twins. The Draupadi, as mentioned in the Mahabharata, is described as not as a very fair lady, but a dusky lady. So it looks like there is a cultural similarity between the Indus civilization and Vedic civilization, and it doesn't indicate any discontinuity in material or cultural or religious continuity from Indus civilization into Vedic civilization and later the Puranic civilization within India. The fact supporting elite recruitment, so it's not possible that there is no migration. There is some migration. So some technology, for example, horses and chariots transfer from steppes into India through some elite traders. So elite traders mixing with the elite Indus Saraswati civilization people. New ideas and philosophies developed by descendants of these elite traders from steppes and elite people from the Indus civilization. So the indigenous development of the new religious thought from the Indus into from the nature worshippers into some other ritualistic fire worshippers, and this is developed in situ, so it's developed indigenously within the northwestern part of India and the central part of India through Vedas and Upanishads and various other cultures. So, just to conclude my discussion, um, I just want to talk about the what is the left wing position. So the left wing has some kind of an inferiority complex. So at the heart of these Aryan arguments of the foreign culture and thus the discontinuity is to deny the longest civilizational continuity within India. So the India is a homogeneous mixture of different cultures, different people. So instead of accepting this common and great civilizational past as a true Indic liberal, especially the left Marxist historians try to find the roots of the Indus civilization somewhere else, which is basically frustrating. In their opinion, the India had no civilizational history. Everything in India came from outside through Aryans and through Arab world and through Europe on a later date, and indigenous Indians were capable of nothing. That's what they are trying to propose here, that all the thoughts originated outside India and then transferred into India, which is very driven by some kind of an inferiority complex through these people. All architecture, literature, religion, science, philosophies have come from outside India. Indians are no equal people. They are divided in south and north and upper caste and lower caste, and upper caste people came from outside with superior strength and made lower caste people their slaves. and everything indigenous is bad. What we see and try to find out through this leftist Marxist historians is they try to portray an image of India as, or Indian culture as, everything bad. It's not that way. And we'll have to look into the realities. Similarly, uh, uh, the right wing is now no good. They have some misplaced and stupid Hindutva position. So what they claim is antiquity of Vedas. You will find some people talking about the Vedas were composed in 3 million BC, or 30,000 BC and all that nonsense. It is not possible for the Vedas to have been composed anything prior to 3000 BC, because the chariots itself were invented at 3000 BC. So anyone claiming that, a stupid claim that the Mahabharata war took place some 30,000, 1 lakh year ago. That is simply stupid. It is not possible, because there were no spoked wheels anywhere. No architectural evidence has been found of any spoke wheel anywhere before, anywhere, anytime before 3000 BC. Um, and another claim that these right wingers make is the India is the root of all civilization, which is not true. Mesopotamian civilization started on its own. Egyptian civilization started before Indian civilization started. So there is absolutely no truth in that. That India is the mother civilization of all civilization. It's not true. Again, everything was discovered in India. They take all philosophies, all science, all religions have spread from India, which again is a stupid claim. Each civilization had contributed to the modern world, some in more, some in less contributions, but everyone had their contributions, and India is one of the contributors to that. And we should rightfully claim our contributions and not try to deny um, other civilizations and their achievements in the history of the modern world. Uh, and they claim that the caste system was not there in India. It was propagated by British. Again, not true. The caste system started in India 100 AD, and has been existent in India since 2000 years, and which is a very unfortunate thing. To deny this reality is a stupid thing to do. Everything indigenous is good, and all cultural practices practiced within India in ancient times are good, is what Hindu position is. Again, not true. There are some good things, some bad things. We should be able to distinguish between these two and accept the modern concept, the modern scientific view, and not embrace the old crap just in the name of culture. Indian culture values are most pure and nothing to be changed. Again, wrong thing. And all Indian people are original. Nothing came from outside. As we know, everything came from outside. Even the most tribal part of India have their origins in Africa. So no one is, and even the no one is Mool Nivasi. This Neodalit Mool Nivasi concept is again a crap, because everyone starting from the Asi, the Andamanese people, to all the modern day blonde hair, blue eyed people that are found in northern India are all came from outside. So at some point, uh, the most important part to understand is the cultural aspects when where they developed. So my centrist conclusions are this: Indian culture and traditions are melting pot of all three races: Caucasoid, Mongoloid, and Negroid, and six language families: Indo-European, Dravidian, Austric, Sino-Tibetan, Burusaki, and Andamanese language. So it consists of all. Sanskrit is an independent branch of Indo-European language and was developed in and around the northwest India. So Sanskrit did not come from outside. Sanskrit was developed here through some ancient Indo-European languages, but the classical Sanskrit, the Rigvedic Sanskrit, was composed in the mainland India between 3000 BC to 2000 BC through some Iranian and steppe region, but large-scale migration did not happen to change the Indian jewel. Indus civilization and culture are unbroken continuity for thousands of years. Indus civilization continued into Vedic civilization and then continued into Upanishadic thought and later Buddhism and Jainism. Simultaneously, at the same time, the northern India was with this Sanskrit literature. The southern India was flourishing with the ancient temple culture. Lot of amazing architecture, temple architecture was developed. The Sangam literature was developed, and Rama and Krishna folklores were seeded here in mainland India. They are not coming from outside. The Indian civilization, as we talk today, has basically developed after Guptas and Mauryas. The way we recognize the Hinduism today, um, you will not find any similarity with what was practiced back in 1000 BC. There are some roots, some parts of Rig Veda that were mixed into the current day Indian thought, but the India, the the Indian culture today is a mixture of a lot of different cultures. The Vedas constitute an important component, but it is not the only complete whole. The Hinduism is a mixture of various traditions, cultures, philosophies. Those are mixed over centuries. It is dangerous and divisive to try and beat out the individual component. Uh, Indian Hindu civilization is indigenous by definition since it was developed in situ. When I say in situ, I mean into mainland India. Though the languages came from outside, the culture was developed here in situ in mainland India. Later Muslim invasions, happened through 1000 AD all the way up to probably 1600 AD, were barbaric at first, but they followed the Indian way of living and completely mixed into the local culture. Everyone of this land, whether they are Mongoloid, where they are Mughals, Arabs, Persians, Parthians, Shakas, Kushanas, Vedic people, the Indus people, the South Indian people, the Andamanese people, everyone is part and inheritor of this culture, irrespective of what faith they may be following. And all Indians, and this has been proven by science, that all Indians share a genetic history and are equal citizens of India. With that, thank you very much. I will be doing the part four, summarizing all this thing into one small 15 minutes video. I know this is a very big video, but thank you for listening to this.